LGBTQ, transgender, same-sex marriage. We're going to look at some of them more. When do we coin the term homosexual? You know when it was? 1869. It was first coined by Hungarian journalist Karl Maria Kirchbeny. Then in 1897, the first known gay rights organization called the Scientific Humanitarian Committee is founded in Germany. 1924, Magnus Hirschfeld publishes The Transvestites, The Psychology of Sex Expression. This was one of the first scientific studies of transgender people. 1968, congressional proceedings reference gender identity that occurs in a report on public health service under the National Institute of Mental Health summary of sex deviates, which included gender identity disorder as a future direction for research. That's 1968 under Lyndon Johnson, if you want to know who the president is. 1971, the first legal challenge to a state ban on same-sex marriage was filed in Minnesota. 1973, which by the way is only about 50 years ago if you think about it. Ready? The American Psychiatric Association removes homosexuality from its list of mental disorders. That means in 1972 being homosexual was a mental disorder. This ain't 200 years ago, folks. This is just 50 years ago, when we, the health professions, used to think it was a mental disorder to be gay. 1973, it changed. 1974, the first gay pride marches are held in New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago. 1986, you ready for this one? Courts rule that there is no constitutional protection for sodomy in Bowers versus Hardwick. Ruling allows sodomy to continue being criminally prosecuted in states where laws prohibit homosexual activity. So why is this 1986? Because the AIDS epidemic was in June of 81 and people were worried about what was going to take place. A lot of gay folks were getting AIDS because the whole concept of sodomy is what they're talking about. If you don't know what sodomy is, don't go Google it because some sites may come up. But that's kind of what caused this 1986 ruling. 1987, the Supreme Court of the United States rules that sexual orientation is not a constitutionally protected class. This is 87, okay? How long ago was that? 35 years ago? 36 years ago? 1988. 1993 was the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy prohibiting lesbians, gay, and bisexual people from coming out or telling others about anything related to their sexual activity. Anything related to their sexuality is codified on this date. Same year, 1993, the Supreme Court of the United States rules that the Boy Scouts of America cannot discriminate against gays and lesbian scouts. 1994, big year, the National Education Association, NEA, passes a resolution calling for the inclusion of LGBTQ topics in the curriculum. 1996, another interesting one, Congress passes the Defense of Marriage Act, DOMA, which defines marriage as between one man and one woman for federal purposes, signed by the one and only Bill Clinton. This was obviously a major setback for the same-sex marriage, but it was overturned in 2013. 2003, the Supreme Court of the United States rules that same-sex sexual activity is illegal in all 50 states. 2004, Massachusetts becomes the first state to legalize same-sex marriage. Do you want to know who the governor was? Republican Governor Mitt Romney. 2005, the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network releases its first national school climate survey, which finds that LGBTQ students are disproportionately bullied and harassed in schools, which leads to 2008, California voters approved Proposition 8, which bans same-sex marriage in the state. 2009, Proclamation 8387, President Barack Obama dedicates June as Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Pride Month. 2011, California passes the Fair Education Act, which requires that all public schools in the state teach about the contributions of LGBTQ community to history and culture. 2011, Don't Ask, Don't Tell is repealed. 2013, Gender Identity Disorder updated to Gender Dysphoria in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. In 2015, this is a big one, the Supreme Court rules in Obergefell versus Hodges that the fundamental right to marry is guaranteed to same-sex couples by the Due Process and Equal Protection Clauses of the 14th Amendment. This decision legalizes same-sex marriage in all 50 states. Okay, so in 2016, 2017, Barack Obama tried to make it more inclusive for transgenders to be able to participate and not get judged. Trump comes up and he revokes it, but then here's what happens the following year in 2018. The White House announces that most transgender people are prohibited in the military, okay? Then in 2020, a letter from the Department of Education announces that the inclusion of transgender athletes in sports teams based on their gender identity is a Title IX violation. This motion effectively bans transgender athletes from participating in sports.